The final battle for galactic supremacy lasted exactly 4 hours and 17 minutes. When it ended, the largest military coalition in galactic history had been reduced to scattered debris and surrender broadcasts. Supreme Chancellor Kethanira's flagship drifted powerless in space, its crew broadcasting desperate pleas for mercy. Fleet Admiral Xionghuan No stood on the bridge of his command ship, the massive dreadnought New Seoul, watching as the last coalition vessels lowered their weapons. Around him, holographic displays showed the true scale of humanity's military power. Tens of thousands of ships that had remained hidden until this moment. "Admiral," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving surrender transmissions from all remaining coalition forces. They're requesting terms." Xionghuan nodded slowly. "Patch me through to all coalition vessels and all galactic communication networks. It's time to explain what comes next." His image appeared on screens across the galaxy, from the bridge of Supreme Chancellor Kethanira's flagship to communication centers on thousands of worlds. For the first time, alien civilizations were seeing a human in a position of absolute authority over their fates. "People of the galaxy," he began, his voice carrying the weight of demonstrated power. "The old order has ended. What happens next depends entirely on your choices." President So-Ra Kim had been preparing for this moment for her entire political career. She stood in the newly constructed Terra Nova Station, humanity's diplomatic hub positioned at the edge of human space. The station itself was a demonstration of human technology. It existed partially in folded space, making it larger inside than its external dimensions suggested. "Today begins a new chapter in galactic civilization," she announced to assembled representatives from across known space. But unlike previous transitions of power, this one is based on cooperation rather than conquest. The representatives came from dozens of species, some arriving as victors celebrating their liberation from oppressive overlords, others arriving as defeated powers, hoping for mercy. All of them were learning that humanity's approach to victory was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Director of Galactic Relations Chan Wu Li began explaining the framework that would govern the new order. Unlike the previous system where powerful species dominated weaker ones, humanity was implementing something revolutionary, a government based on equality between all civilizations. "The new covenant," he explained to the assembled delegates, "guarantees the right of all species to develop according to their own choices. No civilization may be enslaved, exploited, or destroyed for the benefit of others." The terms were radical by galactic standards but backed by overwhelming force. Any species that joined the new covenant received full protection from human military forces. Any species that refused to abide by its principles faced the same fate as the Velthari hegemony. Chief Science Advisor Sujin Ko revealed humanity's most generous secret. The advanced technology that had made human victory possible would be shared freely with any species that committed to the new covenant's principles of peaceful development and mutual aid. "The galaxy has suffered for millennia under the assumption that knowledge must be hoarded by the powerful," she explained to stunned alien scientists. "Humanity believes that progress comes from cooperation, not competition." The offer was unprecedented in galactic history. Species that had been deliberately kept primitive suddenly had access to technology that could transform their civilizations within generations. Manufacturing techniques that could create abundance from simple materials. Medical knowledge that could eliminate disease and extend lifespans. Transportation technology that could connect distant worlds in hours rather than months. But the gift came with strict conditions. Any species that used human technology for oppression or conquest would immediately lose access and face military intervention. The new order would be enforced with the same overwhelming force that had destroyed the old one. Ambassador Dong-Soo Kim returned to the original Galactic Council chambers for the last time. The Great Hall had been converted into a memorial for the old order, a reminder of what happened when power was used for oppression rather than protection. He walked slowly across the polished floor where he had once delivered humanity's final warning to deaf ears. The chamber was empty now except for historical displays showing the rise and fall of galactic civilizations that had chosen conquest over cooperation. "They could have chosen differently," he said quietly to Hyunwoo Park, who had accompanied him on this final visit. Every step of the way, they could have chosen peace. Yunwu nodded, studying a display that showed the timeline of human diplomatic efforts. 50 years of attempted integration, decades of warnings about the consequences of aggression, countless offers to share technology and knowledge peacefully. We gave them every opportunity, Yunwu replied. They chose to see our restraint as weakness rather than mercy. Across the galaxy, the transformation was already beginning. On worlds that had been strip-mined by galactic corporations, human terraforming technology was restoring devastated ecosystems. Species that had been classified as primitive were receiving education and resources to develop their own advanced civilizations. Dr. Yoon-Young Choi led the team responsible for dismantling the oppressive systems that had maintained galactic inequality. Hidden networks of exploitation were exposed and destroyed. Economic systems designed to keep most species poor were replaced with frameworks that encouraged prosperity for all. The old system was based on artificial scarcity, she explained to former coalition leaders who were learning to function under the new order. Powerful species convinced others that there wasn't enough prosperity to go around. In reality, advanced technology can create abundance for everyone. The psychological transformation was as important as the technological one. Species that had been told they were inferior learned they had actually been victims of systematic oppression. Civilizations that had believed they were too primitive for advanced technology discovered they had been deliberately held back. Prime. Scholar Lethanara of the Archive Keepers became one of humanity's most valuable allies in this transformation. Her species' historical records provided evidence of the old order's crimes, while their expertise in knowledge preservation helped establish new educational systems. For the first time in galactic history, she reported to the New Covenant Assembly, information is being shared rather than hoarded. Young species are learning advanced concepts in years rather than centuries. Some former galactic powers struggled to adapt to the new order. Supreme Chancellor Kethanira, stripped of her political authority but allowed to live, attempted to organize resistance movements among species that had benefited from the old system. But she found little support. Most civilizations were too busy celebrating their liberation to mourn the loss of their oppressors. Even many Dominion citizens welcomed the change, having grown tired of a system that enriched a few while impoverishing the majority. Captain Min Seo-jung, now serving as a liaison between human forces and liberated worlds, witnessed the transformation firsthand. On planets where populations had lived in poverty while their resources were exported to enrich galactic powers, new technology was creating unprecedented prosperity. It's remarkable, she reported to Earth Command. These people are achieving, in months, what they were told would take centuries. All they needed was access to the knowledge that was being kept from them. Admiral Young-Ho Kang supervised the establishment of humanity's new role as galactic peacekeepers. Human fleets patrolled space not as conquerors, but as protectors, ensuring that no species could resume the old patterns of exploitation and domination. The human military doctrine for the new order was simple. Any attempt to oppress or exploit another species would be met with immediate and overwhelming force. The galaxy had seen what happened to civilizations that chose aggression over cooperation. But humanity's greatest achievement was not their military victory. It was proving that strength could be used to protect rather than dominate. The same technology that had destroyed oppressive empires was now being used to lift entire civilizations out of poverty and ignorance. Fleet Admiral In-kyung Lee addressed the first New Covenant Assembly from humanity's perspective on galactic governance. Power without compassion leads to inevitable downfall, she explained to representatives from across the galaxy. We learned this lesson from studying your history. We will not repeat your mistakes. The assembly itself was revolutionary. Every species, regardless of size or technological level, had an equal voice in galactic governance. Decisions were made through consensus rather than domination, with humanity serving as mediators and enforcers of the peace. Commander Tae-ho Shin, now responsible for training new galactic security forces, worked with representatives from dozens of species to create defense systems based on cooperation rather than competition. Former enemies were learning to work together to protect their shared prosperity. The old galaxy was built on the assumption that someone had to be weak for others to be strong, he explained to his diverse trainees. The new galaxy proves that everyone can be strong when they work together. 5 years after the final battle, Ambassador Dong-Soo Kim stood once again in what had been the Galactic. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in chaos. The great chamber that had once been filled with confident delegates from powerful civilizations now held frightened representatives of species facing an impossible choice. In less than 3 months, humanity had completely destroyed the Velthari hegemony and systematically dismantled several of their allied civilizations. Ambassador Mi Young-oh walked slowly to the speaking platform, her measured steps echoing through the unusually quiet chamber. Unlike the previous human ambassador who had delivered warnings, she carried the authority of a species that had proven their words with overwhelming force. "Honored delegates," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the translation systems, "I come before you not as a supplicant requesting membership, but as a representative of humanity, presenting new terms for galactic civilization." Supreme Chancellor Kethanira sat rigid on her floating throne, her tentacles moving in patterns that indicated barely controlled fear. The Dominion had lost 3 major allied species in the past month, each one reduced from galactic power to pre-industrial civilization in a matter of days. "The old order is finished," Mi Young continued. "The system that allowed powerful species to dominate and exploit weaker ones ends today. Humanity demands immediate recognition as a Tier 1 galactic power, complete reparations for attacks on human colonies, and total restructuring of galactic law to prevent future aggression against emerging species." Several delegates began making sounds of protest, but Mi Young raised her hand for silence. "These are not requests. These are the terms under which humanity will allow the current galactic civilization to continue existing." The threat was clear and backed by demonstrated capability. Every species in the chamber had watched the systematic destruction of the Velthari hegemony. They had seen civilizations that had existed for millennia reduced to scrap metal and broken infrastructure within weeks. Diplomatic Corps Director Jae-seok Yu began implementing the next phase of humanity's strategy. Hidden throughout the galaxy, human intelligence operatives activated data releases that would shake galactic civilization to its foundations. "People of the galaxy," his voice echoed through communication networks across known space. "For too long you have been told that your species are too primitive, too weak, too young to govern yourselves. Today, humanity presents the truth." The data dumps that followed contained centuries of suppressed information. Documentation of how the major galactic powers had deliberately prevented younger species from developing advanced technology. Military reports detailing the systematic destruction of civilizations that showed too much potential. Economic analyses proving that the galactic trade system was designed to keep most species dependent and weak. On dozens of worlds, populations that had been told they were protected by benevolent galactic powers discovered they had actually been enslaved. Species that had been convinced they lacked the intelligence for advanced technology learned that their development had been deliberately sabotaged. The revelations triggered uprisings across the galaxy. On the industrial world of Kepler-7, workers who had been mining resources for the Dominion for 3 centuries suddenly realized they had been paid a fraction of what their labor was worth. On the research station of Alpha Centauri, scientists discovered that their breakthrough discoveries had been stolen and credited to Dominion researchers. Prime scholar Lethnara of the Archive Keepers was among the first to seek formal alliance with humanity. Her species had spent millennia collecting and preserving knowledge, and they had long suspected that galactic civilization was built on lies and oppression. "Honored humans," she transmitted from the great library world of Sanctum Prime. "The Archive Keepers offer our complete historical databases in exchange for protection and partnership. We have documented the crimes of the galactic powers for centuries, but lacked the strength to expose them." The Archive Keepers' records contained devastating evidence of systematic oppression spanning thousands of years. Species that had been classified as extinct due to natural causes were revealed to have been exterminated for developing technology that threatened established powers. Worlds that had been listed as uninhabitable were shown to have been rendered toxic by deliberate pollution from galactic industrial operations. But not all species chose to side with humanity. The traditional powers, led by Supreme Chancellor Kethanira, began forming a coalition of species that refused to accept the new order. They believed that their combined military might could still overwhelm the humans. "We will not bow to these primitives," Kethanira declared to her allies. "The Dominion has ruled space for 8 centuries. We will not surrender our authority to upstart barbarians." Admiral Wu Sung-cha received the intelligence reports about the forming coalition from his command ship hidden in the Kuiper belt of the Sol system. Around him, humanity's ultimate revelation prepared to deploy, technology that would prove the galaxy had understood nothing about human capabilities. "Ma'am," his tactical officer reported, "long-range sensors are detecting massive fleet movements. The Dominion Coalition is assembling the largest military force in galactic history." Wu Sung smiled grimly. "Then it's time to show them why numbers don't matter when your enemy operates outside the known laws of physics." Captain Yeonju Park led the first deployment of humanity's most classified technology aboard the research vessel Discovery. Her ship had spent decades disguised as a simple survey craft while actually testing technology that alien scientists would have considered impossible. "All stations," she announced to her crew, "activating impossibility engines. Prepare for dimensional variance protocols." The Discovery suddenly existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. To alien sensors, it appeared as 17 different ships in 17 different locations, all moving in ways that violated every known law of physics. When it fired its weapons, the energy beam struck targets from angles that geometry insisted could not exist. Dr. Sung-Ho Park, humanity's chief theoretical physicist, watched from his laboratory aboard the Lunar Research Station as his life's work finally revealed itself to the galaxy. For 50 years, he had been developing technology based on principles that alien science had never discovered. "Deploying temporal manipulation systems," he reported to Earth Command. "Enemy fleets will experience localized time distortion effects." Human ships began demonstrating the ability to manipulate time itself. They could slow down enemy vessels while maintaining normal speed themselves, making alien ships appear to move through thick liquid. They could accelerate their own temporal state, allowing them to fire dozens of shots while enemy weapons were still charging. The coalition fleet that approached human space consisted of over 5,000 ships, representing 12 major galactic civilizations. It was the most powerful military force ever assembled in galactic history. The combined firepower could have destroyed entire star systems. But firepower meant nothing when the enemy could exist outside normal spacetime. Fleet Admiral In Kyung Lee commanded humanity's response from the massive dreadnought Earth's Wrath. The ship was itself a demonstration of impossible technology. It existed partially in normal space and partially in folded dimensions, making it larger on the inside than physics should have allowed. "Coalition forces," she broadcast on all frequencies, "you have chosen to support a system based on oppression and exploitation. You have rejected our offers of peaceful coexistence. You will now experience the full extent of human military capability." The Xiaop battle that followed could barely be called a battle. Human ships moved through space in ways that alien tactical computers could not calculate. They appeared and disappeared at will, struck from impossible angles, and seemed to ignore the basic laws of physics. Coalition weapons fired at targets that suddenly were not where they appeared to be. Energy beams passed harmlessly through human ships that existed in shifted dimensional states. Kinetic projectiles found themselves redirected by localized spacetime distortions. Meanwhile, human weapons struck with devastating effectiveness. Their temporal manipulation systems allowed them to fire at enemy ships in the past, destroying them before they could even detect the attack. Their dimensional variance weapons struck targets from directions that did not exist in normal space. General Kyungmin Yoon coordinated ground operations on worlds where coalition forces tried to establish defensive positions. But human troops did not fight like anything the galaxy had ever seen. They could phase partially out of normal reality, making them immune to most alien weapons while still able to affect the physical world. "Sir," his aide reported, Coalition ground forces on Delta Prime are reporting that our troops are appearing inside their fortifications without passing through the walls. Human soldiers could step sideways through dimensions, bypassing any physical barrier. They struck from angles that should not exist, disappeared when attacked, and reappeared where enemies least expected them. The psychological effect on alien forces was devastating. How could you fight an enemy that ignored the fundamental laws of reality? How could you plan defenses against opponents who could be in multiple places simultaneously? Commander Dalho Kim led the systematic dismantling of coalition communication networks using technology. Warcast Prime Kolvax had made his choice. Despite the warnings, despite the evidence of human capabilities, he ordered the full mobilization of the Velthari hegemony. Within days, the largest military force in galactic history began moving toward human space. Over 2,000 ships carrying the combined might of 400 star systems. He believed that raw numbers would overcome human technology. He was wrong. Admiral Ji-hoon Seo received the intelligence reports aboard his flagship, the destroyer Storm's End, positioned at the edge of human space. The Velthari were coming in force, but they still did not understand what they were facing. They thought this would be a conventional war fought by conventional rules. Humans fought by different rules entirely. All units, Ji-hoon transmitted to his fleet commanders. Implement Protocol 7, total infrastructure denial. No mercy, no quarter, no survivors with the capability to fight again. This was the doctrine that terrified even human military planners. Unlike galactic warfare, which focused on fleet engagements and negotiated surrenders, humans practiced total war. They did not simply defeat enemy forces. They eliminated the enemy's ability to make war entirely. Colonel Haiwan Kim led the first ground assault teams to target Velthari supply bases, but her forces did not fight like any army the aliens had ever seen. Instead of attacking military targets and avoiding civilian infrastructure, the humans systematically dismantled every component of the Velthari war machine. Primary target is the orbital foundries above Veltar Prime, she briefed her battalion commanders. Secondary targets are the mining operations in the asteroid belt. Tertiary targets include the academy systems and the research installations. Her troops moved with precision that seemed impossible. They struck simultaneously across dozens of star systems, hitting targets that should have taken months to locate and weeks to reach. But humans had been mapping Velthari space for decades, and their transportation technology allowed them to appear anywhere within hours. The Velthari discovered that their enemies did not fight honorable battles between military forces. Human Engineering Corps, led by Chief Engineer Min-ho Jang, redirected asteroid fields to blockade enemy systems. They turned Velthari infrastructure against itself, causing industrial accidents that destroyed entire manufacturing complexes. Sir, Jang reported to his commanding officer, we've successfully destabilized the orbital mechanics around 3 major Velthari industrial worlds. Their own asteroid mining operations are now creating debris fields that make space travel impossible. This was warfare on a scale the galaxy had never imagined. Humans did not simply win battles. They reshaped entire star systems to prevent their enemies from ever fighting again. Within weeks, Velthari space became a maze of impassable debris fields and unstable orbital mechanics. Lieutenant Commander Kyung-Soo Bae demonstrated humanity's logistical superiority during the Battle of the Kethmar Nebula. His supply fleet appeared simultaneously in 6 different star systems, delivering weapons and resources with perfect timing across impossible distances. The aliens had always assumed that logistics was the limiting factor in interstellar warfare. Human fleets should have been unable to maintain operations far from their home bases. Instead, they seemed to have unlimited supplies and could fight indefinitely without returning to friendly territory. How are they doing this? Demanded Velthari Fleet Commander Sektal, as his forces found themselves surrounded by human ships that had appeared from nowhere. Our intelligence says they have no supply bases in this sector. The answer would have terrified him if he had known it. Humans had been building hidden supply caches throughout the galaxy for decades. Every asteroid field, every dead system, every uninhabited planet had been surveyed and potentially equipped with emergency supplies. More importantly, Human manufacturing technology was decades beyond anything the Velthari possessed. Mobile factories that could be deployed anywhere, automated systems that required no permanent infrastructure, molecular assemblers that could create complex equipment from raw materials in hours rather than months. The Velthari hegemony, which had dominated space for 4 centuries, began to collapse with terrifying speed. Their military doctrine was based on the assumption that wars were fought between fleets in open space, with victories decided by firepower and tactics. But humans fought entire civilizations, not just their military forces. They struck at the economic systems that supported enemy fleets, the industrial base that built their weapons, the educational institutions that trained their officers. Within 2 months, the Velthari found themselves unable to build new ships, train new crews, or even maintain their existing forces. Captain Sujin Park led one of the most devastating attacks in the war. Her strike force targeted the Velthari Naval Academy, where future officers had been trained for generations. But instead of simply destroying the facility, she captured it intact and began broadcasting the truth about Velthari military doctrine to the galaxy. "People of the galaxy," she announced from the Academy's main lecture hall, "see how your protectors train their officers. Study their textbooks on the proper methods for enslaving primitive species. Read their strategic manuals on how to maintain control through fear and oppression." The revelation that the Velthari had been teaching conquest and enslavement as military doctrine shocked even their allies. Species that had supported the hegemony began to question whether they were on the right side of the conflict. War Caste Prime Kolvax made increasingly desperate attempts to rally his forces, but human technology made traditional command structures obsolete. Human ships could intercept and decode Velthari communications faster than they could be transmitted. Every order was known to human forces before it reached its intended recipients. Dr. Hai Young Nam, working from a captured Velthari research station, began demonstrating humanity's most terrifying capability: the ability to turn enemy technology against itself. Velthari ships found their own weapon systems malfunctioning, their navigation computers providing false information, their life support systems failing at critical moments. "The beauty of studying your enemies for 50 years, she explained to her research team, is that you learn all the weaknesses they don't know they have. Human cyber warfare was so advanced that it seemed like magic to alien observers. Velthari computers began displaying human propaganda. Navigation systems started routing ships to human ambush points. Even personal communication devices began broadcasting human messages to their owners. The Galactic Council watched the systematic destruction of the Velthari hegemony with growing horror. This was not warfare as they understood it. This was the complete elimination of an entire galactic power within months of the conflict beginning. Supreme Chancellor Kethnira sent desperate diplomatic messages to human leaders, offering negotiations and ceasefires. But humanity's response was consistent and terrifying. "The time for negotiation has passed. You chose war. You will receive war without mercy." Admiral Young Ho Kang demonstrated exactly what war without mercy meant when he addressed the galaxy from his flagship. Behind him, holographic displays showed the complete destruction of Velthari military capability. "The Velthari hegemony attacked our colonies without warning," he said calmly. "They enslaved our people. They showed no mercy to civilian populations. They have received the same consideration they showed to others." The displays showed Velthari space transformed into a wasteland. Their industrial worlds were uninhabitable, their fleets were scrap metal, their military academies were broadcasting human propaganda. The civilization that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries had effectively ceased to exist as a political entity, but the humans were not finished. Fleet Admiral Sukja Nam began implementing the next phase of human military doctrine: the elimination of all species that chose to support the Velthari cause. "All allied forces," she transmitted, "you have 48 hours to withdraw from Velthari space and declare neutrality. After that time you will be considered hostile combatants and treated accordingly." Several minor species immediately withdrew their support and began seeking separate peace with humanity. But the major galactic powers led by the Dominion chose to continue their support for the Velthari. They would soon learn that humanity's destruction of the hegemony had been a demonstration of restraint compared to what they were truly capable. of Commander Tae-ho Shin led the human forces assigned to demonstrate this point. His fleet appeared simultaneously in 12 different star systems belonging to Velthari allies, striking with coordination that should have been impossible across such distances. "This is Commander Shin of the Human Defense Force," he broadcast, "on all frequencies. You have chosen to continue supporting a regime that practices genocide and enslavement. You will now experience the consequences of that choice." The attacks that followed were surgical in their precision and devastating in their effectiveness. Human forces did not simply destroy enemy fleets. They dismantled the entire infrastructure that supported hostile civilizations. Within hours, species that had existed as galactic powers for millennia found themselves reduced to pre-industrial technology levels. Their spacecraft were disabled. Their communication networks were. The news of New Busan spread through galactic communication networks like wildfire through dry grass. Within hours, every major civilization knew that something impossible had happened. The Velthari hegemony, masters of 400 star systems and conquerors of dozens of species, had sent 200 ships to crush a human colony. Only 3 had returned. Intelligence Director Tae-jun Lim sat in his underground office on Earth, watching the reactions pour in from monitoring stations across the galaxy. For 30 years, he had overseen humanity's greatest secret, a surveillance network that penetrated every major alien civilization. Now, as panic spread through alien command centers, he finally allowed himself to smile. "Sir," his aide said, entering with a stack of data tablets, "we're receiving confirmation from all sectors. The revelation protocols are proceeding exactly as planned." Tae-jun nodded, studying the reports. Across known space, human assets were dropping their disguises. The research stations that had been monitoring alien worlds for decades revealed their true nature as advanced surveillance platforms. Cargo ships that had traded peacefully in alien ports suddenly transmitted detailed intelligence about every military installation they had visited. On the Dominion homeworld, Supreme Chancellor Kethanira received reports that made her tentacles writhe with anxiety. The humans had not just defeated the Velthari fleet. They had done it using technology that should not exist, weapons that bypassed known physics, ships that moved with impossible coordination, defenses that rendered traditional attacks useless. But worse than the technology was the intelligence. Human merchants had been collecting detailed information about Dominion military capabilities for decades. They knew the locations of secret bases, the specifications of classified weapons, even the personal codes of high-ranking officials. "How long?" she asked her intelligence chief. "How long have they been watching us?" The answer came from intercepted human transmissions that the Dominion's code breakers were frantically trying to decode. Based on the data being revealed, humanity had been conducting systematic surveillance of galactic civilization for at least 50 years. Fleet Admiral Young-ho Kang decided it was time to address the galaxy directly. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, Earth's Shield, with the full might of humanity's true fleet arrayed behind him. The view screens showed row after row of advanced warships, each one representing technology that the aliens had never imagined. "People of the galaxy," he began, his words being transmitted simultaneously to every major alien communication network. "I am Fleet Admiral Young-ho Kang of the Human Defense Force. What you have witnessed at New Busan is only the beginning." The transmission showed the true scale of human military power. Over 3,000 ships of previously unknown design and capability. Weapons that operated on principles the galaxy's greatest scientists had never discovered. Defensive systems that made traditional warfare obsolete. "For 50 years," Young-ho continued, "humanity has operated under strict limitations. We have deliberately concealed our true capabilities while studying every aspect of galactic civilization. We have built our defenses in secret while maintaining the appearance of weakness." On Velthari Prime, Warcast Prime Kolvax watched the transmission with growing horror. The humans were revealing military technology that surpassed anything in the Velthari arsenal. Ships that could exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Weapons that manipulated time itself. Defenses that converted enemy attacks into energy sources. "This is impossible," he snarled to his advisors. No species could develop such technology without our knowledge. But they had. While the galaxy's great powers fought limited wars and maintained the status quo, humanity had been revolutionizing the very concept of warfare. They had not just built better weapons, they had discovered entirely new forms of combat. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session within hours of Young-Ho's transmission. The usual careful protocols were abandoned as delegates arrived in whatever ships they could find. The chamber buzzed with fear and confusion as representatives tried to understand how they had been so completely deceived. Supreme Chancellor Kethanira called the session to order with obvious difficulty. Her voice carried the strain of someone whose entire worldview had collapsed in a single day. "Delegates," she began, "we face an unprecedented situation. The species we believe to be primitive has revealed capabilities that exceed our own by generations." Warcast Prime Kolvax stood up, his armor dented and scorched from his desperate flight back to Velthari space. "This council must authorize immediate military action. We cannot allow these humans to threaten galactic order." Several delegates made sounds of agreement, but others remained silent. The more intelligent species were already calculating the implications of what they had learned. If humans could hide such vast military capabilities for decades, what else might they be concealing? Diplomatic Caste Prime Ventala of the Peaceful Harmony Collective rose from her section. Her species had always preferred negotiation to warfare, and she recognized the danger in Kolvax's words. "Warcast Prime," she said carefully. "The humans have demonstrated that they possess overwhelming military superiority. Perhaps we should consider their original request for peaceful integration." Kolvax's eyes blazed with fury. "The Velthari hegemony does not bow to primitives. We will gather our full military might and crush these pretenders." But even as he spoke, more reports were arriving. Human intelligence had been far more extensive than anyone realized. They possessed detailed knowledge of every alien military installation, every weapon system, every strategic plan. More importantly, they had been feeding false information to alien intelligence services for decades. Grand Admiral Sukja Nam received her authorization from Earth's government while orbiting Jupiter aboard the massive command ship Soul's Pride. The order was simple: implement total war protocols. This was humanity's military doctrine for exactly this scenario, the complete dismantling of hostile galactic powers. "All fleet commanders," she transmitted, "you are authorized to reveal full capabilities. Show them what humanity really is." Across human space, the transformation accelerated. Hidden shipyards that had been concealed inside asteroids opened to reveal construction facilities larger than most alien space stations. Research centers revealed advanced technology development programs that made the galaxy's greatest scientific achievements look primitive. But the most shocking revelation was humanity's faster-than-light technology. The aliens had always assumed that human FTL drives were crude and inefficient. In reality, they were decades beyond anything the galaxy possessed. Humans could travel between star systems in hours, while alien ships required days or weeks. Captain Min Seo-jung commanded one of the ships revealing humanity's true transportation capabilities. Her vessel, the exploration ship Horizon, had been conducting scientific surveys in alien territory for 20 years. Now she activated systems that allowed her to jump instantly between distant star systems, something the galaxy scientists insisted was impossible. "Earth Command, this is Captain Young," she reported from the edge of Dominion space. "Beginning systematic survey of alien military installations. Estimated completion time, 6 hours. In 6 hours, a single human ship would visit and catalog every major military facility in Dominion territory." The implications were terrifying to alien military planners. If humans could move their ships with such speed and precision, traditional defensive strategies became meaningless. The Galactic Council session devolved into chaos as more reports arrived. Species that had dominated space for millennia discovered that humans had been monitoring their most secret activities. Military plans that had been classified at the highest levels were being broadcast on public channels. Intelligence Director Tai-jun authorized the release of historical data that shocked even the peaceful species. For centuries, the galaxy's major powers had been systematically suppressing younger civilizations, preventing them from developing advanced technology, keeping them weak and dependent. The humans released this information publicly, causing uprisings across dozens of previously subjugated worlds. Species that had been told they were too primitive for advanced technology discovered that they had been deliberately held back by their supposed protectors. Dr. Kyung-Suk Lee, humanity's chief xenoarchaeologist, revealed perhaps the most damaging information of all. Human research had uncovered evidence that several major galactic powers had actually stolen their technology from species they had later destroyed. The great civilizations of the galaxy were built on conquest and theft, not innovation and progress. Some species began seeking immediate alliance with humanity. The Archive Keepers, a scholarly race that had always remained neutral in galactic politics, offered their vast historical databases in exchange for protection and technological sharing. Their leader, Prime Scholar Lethnara, transmitted a formal request for human partnership within hours of the new Busan reports. Honored humans, her message read, the Archive Keepers have long suspected that galactic civilization was built on deception and oppression. We offer our knowledge and our friendship to those who would build a better order. Other species, particularly those that had profited from the Commander Boram Lee stood on the bridge of what appeared to be a simple cargo hauler, watching the sensor displays as the Velthari fleet approached New Busan colony. 200 ships moved in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with the confidence of a force that had never known defeat. They expected to find maybe 20 human defense vessels, probably outdated and poorly armed. They had no idea what was really waiting for them. Commander, said Lieutenant Jinwoo Park from the communication station, we're receiving the authorization codes from Earth Command. Boram nodded and opened the sealed orders that had been waiting in her personal safe for 3 years. Inside was a single phrase that would change everything. Restriction Protocol Omega is now lifted. All assets authorized. Show them what we are. She had trained for this moment her entire career, but had always hoped it would never come. For 50 years, humanity had built and prepared while pretending to be weak. Today, the pretense would end. All stations, this is Commander Lee, she announced through the fleet communications. Execute Revelation Protocol. Repeat. Execute Revelation Protocol. All units are weapons-free. Across the new Busan system, things that had appeared harmless began to change. The cargo ships that dotted the space lanes suddenly started shedding their outer hulls, revealing sleek warships underneath. Asteroid mining platforms opened like flowers, exposing massive weapon arrays that had been hidden inside fake rock shells. Even the moons of New Busan itself began to split open, revealing construction facilities that had been building ships in secret for decades. Captain Sung Min Choi commanded what the Velthari sensors had identified as a simple freight escort. His ship was listed in galactic databases as a basic patrol vessel, barely armed and certainly no threat to a proper warship. But as the disguise plating fell away, it revealed something the galaxy had never seen before. The ship underneath was sleek and deadly, covered in weapon systems that used principles the aliens had never discovered. Kinetic accelerators that could push projectiles to near light speed, energy weapons that bypassed known shielding technology by operating in dimensions the Velthari did not even know existed, and controlling it all, artificial intelligence systems that could predict enemy movements with impossible accuracy. Velthari Fleet, this is Captain Choi of the Human Defense Force, he broadcast on all frequencies. You are ordered to leave this system immediately. This is your only warning. Warcast Commander Thexnal, leading the Velthari Assault Force, laughed at the transmission. Primitive humans, you have revealed perhaps 30 ships, we have 200. Surrender now and your deaths will be quick. 30 ships? Boram said quietly to her crew. Computer, display actual fleet strength in New Busan system. The holographic display in front of her showed the true picture. What appeared to be 30 human vessels were actually over 300. Mining ships, cargo haulers, research stations, even some of the larger asteroids themselves were actually military assets in disguise. And that was just the beginning. All units, engage at will, Boram commanded. The battle began with the Velthari fleet launching their standard opening barrage. Thousands of plasma bolts and quantum torpedoes streaked toward the human positions. It was a devastating attack that had crushed dozens of species over the centuries. But the human ships did not behave like anything the Velthari had ever fought. They moved with perfect coordination, as if controlled by a single mind. Every shot was calculated, every movement predicted. The aliens' weapons, which should have obliterated the smaller human vessels, seemed to miss with impossible frequency. Captain Sung Min watched his tactical display as the AI systems showed him exactly where each enemy ship would be in the next 30 seconds. The predictive targeting technology was based on quantum computing principles that the galaxy's other species had never discovered. To human eyes, it looked like the enemy ships were moving in slow motion. "Firing solution acquired," announced his weapons officer, Ensign Hee-Jin Kim. "All targets locked." "Fire," Sung Min ordered. The human response was unlike anything in galactic military history. Instead of the wild exchanges of fire that characterized most space battles, the humans fired with surgical precision. Each shot was calculated to achieve maximum effect with minimum waste. The kinetic accelerators launched projectiles that moved so fast they appeared on sensors as flashes of light. When they struck Velthari ships, the results were devastating. Hulls that had been designed to withstand plasma fire simply disintegrated under the kinetic impact. The energy weapons were even more terrifying. They passed through Velthari shields as if they did not exist, striking vital systems with pinpoint accuracy. Ship after ship found their power cores damaged, their weapons disabled, their life support failing. "Impossible," Commander Thexnall screamed into his communications system. "Their weapons cannot penetrate our shields." But they could, and they did. The humans had spent decades studying captured Velthari technology, learning its weaknesses, developing counters for every defense system the aliens possessed. What the Velthari saw as an impossible attack was actually the result of 50 years of careful preparation. Dr. Yoon Ji-han watched the battle from her position aboard the command station, hidden inside New Busan's largest moon. She was not a military officer, but the chief architect of humanity's technological advantages. For decades, she had led the teams that developed weapons and defenses far beyond anything the galaxy had seen. "Project Looking Glass is now active," she reported to Earth Command. "We have complete access to all Velthari communication networks." This was perhaps humanity's greatest secret. While pretending to be technologically primitive, they had actually been monitoring every major alien species for decades. They knew the locations of military bases, the capabilities of weapon systems, even the personal communications of alien leaders. The Velthari fleet found itself fighting an enemy that seemed to know their every move before they made it. Human ships appeared exactly where Velthari commanders planned to retreat. Human weapons struck at the precise moments when alien shields were cycling. It was as if the humans could read their minds. Commander Boram watched as the alien formation began to collapse. Ships that had seemed invincible minutes earlier were now drifting hulks or expanding clouds of debris. The Velthari had started with 200 vessels. After 10 minutes of combat, fewer than 50 remained operational. "Commander," Lieutenant Park reported, "the enemy flagship is attempting to signal surrender." "Denied," Boram replied coldly. "They showed no mercy to our colonists. They will receive none from us." This was another shock to the galactic way of war. For centuries, space battles had been conducted with certain civilized rules. Surrenders were accepted, prisoners were taken, defeated enemies were allowed to withdraw with honor. But humans fought by different rules. They fought to win completely. The remaining Velthari ships found that their attempts to surrender were ignored. Human vessels pursued them with relentless efficiency, disabling their engines, destroying their weapons, leaving them helpless in space. It was not cruelty, but military necessity. The humans had learned from history that enemies allowed to escape would only return stronger. Captain Sung Min coordinated the final phase of the battle. His ship moved through the debris field, hunting down the last few Velthari vessels that were trying to escape. The aliens' faster-than-light drives had been targeted early in the battle, trapping them in the system. "Target acquired," Ensign Kim reported. Enemy cruiser attempting to hide behind asteroid cluster 7. Destroy it, Sung Min ordered. The kinetic accelerator fired once and the Velthari cruiser simply ceased to exist. The projectile had struck with such force that it converted the entire ship to plasma in an instant. After 17 minutes of combat, the battle was over. Of 200 Velthari ships, only 3 remained intact. Commander Boram had deliberately allowed them to survive, but not out of mercy.
Velthari survivors, she broadcast. You will return to your territory. You will report what you have seen here. You will tell your leaders that this was humanity fighting with restraint removed. The 3 surviving ships, their hulls scarred,
and their crews traumatized, began the long journey back to Velthari space. They carried with them news that would shake the galaxy to its foundations. Dr. Yoon-ji Han began implementing the next phase of humanity's revelation. Across known space, systems that aliens had assumed were simple communication relays suddenly began transmitting vast amounts of data. Hidden monitoring stations revealed themselves, showing that humans had been watching every major alien civilization for decades. The primitive humans had not only been building weapons in secret, they had been gathering intelligence on a scale that seemed impossible. They knew the locations of every military base, the capabilities of every weapon system, the political structures of every government. Fleet Admiral Young-Ho Kang received the battle reports aboard his flagship. Hidden, in the outer reaches of the Sol system, around him, the true human defense force prepared to reveal itself to the galaxy. Over 3,000 ships of advanced design, each one capable of matching entire alien fleets. Admiral, his communications officer reported, "We're receiving priority transmissions from galactic intelligence networks." The massive doors of the Galactic Council chambers opened with a deep rumble that echoed through the vast hall. Ambassador Dong-Soo Kim walked slowly across the polished floor, his simple black suit a stark contrast to the colorful robes and exotic armor worn by the alien delegates around him. Behind him, military attaché Hyun-Woo Park followed, carrying a small case that contained humanity's final diplomatic message. The chamber was enormous. 17 different species sat in their designated sections, each area designed to accommodate their unique biology. The Velthari delegation occupied the largest space, their tall, angular forms covered in ceremonial battle armor that gleamed under the artificial lights. Their Warcast Prime, Kolvax, watched the humans with obvious contempt, his 4 eyes glowing red with amusement. Above them all, Supreme Chancellor Kethnira of the Dominion sat on her floating throne, her tentacled form rippling with the patterns that indicated boredom among her species. She had ruled galactic affairs for over 2 centuries and saw humanity as nothing more than an annoying interruption to more important matters. Dong-Soo reached the center speaking platform and activated the translation device. His words would be heard in 17 different languages simultaneously. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes and optical organs of beings who controlled thousands of worlds and trillions of lives. "Honored delegates," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "I stand before you today not as a supplicant, but as a representative of humanity offering one final warning." Several delegates made sounds that the translator registered as laughter. The Zephyrian representative, a creature that looked like a living cloud, pulsed with colors that indicated mockery. Even the usually peaceful Harmony Collective sent ripples of dismissal through their shared consciousness. "For 3 years, Earth has requested full membership in this council," Dong-Soo continued. "We have followed every protocol, met every requirement, and demonstrated our commitment to galactic peace. Yet we are constantly told we are too young, too primitive, too weak to join as equals." Warcast Prime Kolvax stood up in his section, his massive form casting a shadow across the chamber. "Human," he said, his voice like grinding metal. "You speak of equality when your entire species controls only 12 small worlds. The Velthari hegemony spans 400 systems. What could you possibly offer that we cannot take?" The translator barely caught the threatening tone in his words. Several other delegates nodded in agreement. To them, strength was measured in ships, weapons, and conquered territory. By those standards, humanity appeared pathetically weak. Hyun-woo. Park watched from the observation gallery, his hand resting on the case he carried. Inside were detailed files that would shock these beings if they bothered to look. But he knew they would not. Their arrogance blinded them to the truth that had been hiding in plain sight for decades. Supreme Chancellor, Dong-su said, turning. To address Kethnira directly, humanity has always believed in solving conflicts through dialogue. We have restrained ourselves, hoping to prove that we could be trusted partners in galactic civilization. Kethnira's tentacles writhed in what her species considered polite attention. Young human, your restraint is noted. However, restraint born from weakness is hardly admirable. The galaxy is governed by those with the power to maintain order. That brings me to why I'm here today, Dong-su replied. Recent events have forced humanity to reconsider our approach. The Velthari hegemony has attacked 3 of our outer colonies in the past month. They have killed over 50,000 civilians and enslaved twice that number. Kolvax's laugh was like breaking glass. We have reclaimed systems that were always destined to be ours. Your people are fortunate we allow them to live as servants rather than disposing of them entirely. The chamber erupted in various sounds of approval from the aligned species. The Dominion had long supported Velthari expansion, seeing it as a useful tool for maintaining galactic order. Smaller, weaker species learned their place through such examples. Dong-su waited for the noise to die down before speaking again. This brings me to my final message to this council. Humanity has spent the last 50 years trying to join galactic civilization peacefully. We have deliberately limited our military responses, hoping to prove our commitment to diplomatic solutions. He paused, looking directly at each major delegate in turn. But your actions have made it clear that you do not value peace. You only understand strength. Therefore, Earth's government has authorized me to deliver this warning. The chamber grew, quiet. Even species that had been ignoring the proceedings began to pay attention. There was something in the human's tone that suggested this was more than empty posturing. Humanity has been holding back, Dong-su said clearly. We have been restraining our true capabilities out of respect for galactic peace and our hope for diplomatic solutions. But you have shown us that respect and hope are seen as weakness in this galaxy. Supreme Chancellor Kethnira leaned forward on her throne. Are you threatening this council, human? I am delivering a warning, Dong-su replied. Earth's government has voted to lift all restrictions on our military capabilities. The protection protocols we have maintained for decades are being removed. The technological limitations we have imposed on ourselves are being abandoned. Several delegates made dismissive sounds, but others remained silent. A few intelligence operatives in the observation galleries began taking detailed notes for the first time in years. Warcast Prime Kolvax stepped down from his platform, his armor clanking as he moved. Little human, do you think you're 12? Worlds and handful of primitive ships frighten the Velthari hegemony. We have conquered species far more advanced than yours. Dong-su looked at him calmly. Prime Kolvax, in 72 hours, your forces will begin their planned assault on New Busan Colony. You expect this to be a simple annexation operation. I am here to tell you that it will not be. The Velthari leader's eyes blazed brighter. Is that so? And what do you think your pathetic defense fleet will accomplish against 200 of our finest warships? You will discover that very soon, Dong-su said. But remember this moment, Prime Kolvax. Remember that Earth warned you. Remember that we came here seeking peace, offering partnership, hoping for understanding. He turned to address the entire chamber again. We offered to join you as equals. We tried to prove that strength and wisdom could coexist. You have chosen to see our restraint as weakness and our offers of peace as signs of defeat. The human ambassador reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device. He pressed a button, and holographic displays appeared throughout the chamber, showing star maps of human space. These are our current territorial holdings, he said. 12 worlds, as you have noted. Small mining operations, research stations, trade outposts, nothing that would threaten your vast empires. The displays shifted, showing shipping routes and fleet positions. Our military forces appear minimal. Our technology seems primitive. Our response to your aggression has been limited and defensive. He pressed the button again and the displays changed. Now they showed different information: manufacturing capacity charts, resource extraction data, population distributions. The numbers were much higher than anyone had expected. However, Dong-Su continued, appearances can be deceiving. What you see as primitive may be concealment. What you interpret as weakness may be restraint. What you assume is our full capability may be only what we have chosen to reveal. Murmurs began spreading through the chamber as delegates studied the new data. The figures suggested a human presence far larger than anyone had realized. Supreme. Chancellor Kethnira's tentacles moved in patterns that indicated confusion. Human, are you claiming these numbers are accurate? I am stating facts, Chancellor. For 50 years, humanity has been preparing for the day when diplomacy would fail. We hoped it would never come. We tried everything possible to avoid it. But you have made it clear that this galaxy only respects force. Dong-Su walked slowly around the platform, making eye contact with as many delegates as possible. So force is what you will receive. Not the limited, restrained responses we have shown until now. Not the careful, measured actions of a species, trying to prove its peaceful intentions. He stopped walking and stood perfectly still in the center of the platform. When humanity stops holding back, you will understand why we were so careful to restrain ourselves. You will learn why we tried so desperately to find peaceful solutions. Warcast Prime Kolvax made a sound of disgust. Empty threats from a dying species. The Velthari hegemony will crush your pathetic colonies and enslave your people. Your warnings mean nothing. Dong-Su looked at him with something that might have been pity. Prime Kolvax, in 72 hours you will begin to understand exactly what humanity is capable of when we stop trying to be diplomatic. He turned back to the full assembly. This council has made its choice. You have chosen predation over partnership, conquest over cooperation, force over reason. The ambassador walked back toward the exit, Hyunwoo Park falling into step beside him. At the chamber doors, Dong-Su turned for one final statement. Do not say that Earth did not warn. Hugh. The doors closed behind them with that same deep rumble, leaving the Galactic Council in heated discussion. Most